So, this isn't initially how I had planned to do things with Elden Ring's big new DLC, The Shadow of the Erdtree. I've already stated in my playthrough of Elden Ring this last year that I'm pretty sure it's my favorite game ever made, and that's a bold statement. I've played through the Soul series multiple times, multiple playthroughs of Dark Souls 3, Sekiro, Bloodborne, you name it. So naturally I was beyond hyped for Shadow of the Erdtree to drop at the end of June, ready to relive the excitement and wonder of exploring a new land in a game I've already sunk hundreds, if not 1,000 hours into already. Now that the DLC has been out for more than 2 weeks, and I've played through the DLC thoroughly, the age-old question must be asked. What did I think of the giant new Elden Ring expansion, The Shadow of the Erdtree?
Ladies and gentlemen, drum roll, please.
I like it a lot. But, so alright, cards on the table, this is something I have had weighing on my mind for the last 2 years playing Elden Ring in general. And it was an issue that I felt sort of slightly derailed my first playthrough of the game in 2022. Compared to past FromSoft games, I'd say Elden Ring sits at the top, with debatably Sekiro as their hardest video game ever made. However, and I do think I'm in a very small minority when I say this, Elden Ring, at some points, can be unfairly difficult. Now, listen, for context into this little tangent of mine before we get into the DLC and my thoughts on it, I want folks to know that there's been a ton of discourse over the difficulty of Shadow of the Erdtree, with many saying that the difficulty is way too hard, harder than other FromSoft games or DLCs that have come out in the past. Now, as crazy as the FromSoft games being too hard might sound, perhaps, there could be some valid arguments and criticisms made about how and why the difficulty is unfair or seems too hard. Let's take a few steps back. In 2022, base game Elden Ring absolutely rocked many players in terms of difficulty. Didn't matter if you were a Soul series veteran or a noob to Elden Ring, the game was hard, no question. There are, however, a ton of different items and weapons and features in the game that you can use to mitigate the insane difficulty, namely the Spirit Summon feature, which allows you to call upon mobs and characters from the game to aid you in boss fights you're struggling with. This helps to give you a lot of needed breathing room and a relentless boss fight, as the boss can turn his focus onto your Spirit Summon and leaves you time and a large opening to land a few strong attacks against them. There are also two features called Bleed and Frostbite, which are ailments you can fuse to your melee weapons that when fighting a boss can chunk a huge amount of health from their bar. I'm talking like a ridiculous amount. So while there are specific things I think FromSoftware implemented into the game to make boss fights harder, and trust me, we'll be going into depth about those implements later in this video, they did grant players to have a huge freedom in utilizing whatever they gathered within the map of Elden Ring to have at their disposal to fight hard bosses. It was a good balance, but I'd say from my own experience my first time, some of the bosses did absolutely feel way too unfairly overpowered. I do want to get this off my chest as a little side note, as part of the discourse I mentioned earlier about Shadow of the Erdtree is that there was a large number of players complaining that the difficulty in the DLC was way too hard. So much so that a few angry gamers flocked to Steam to leave a neat little negative review on Shadow of the Erdtree. I do want to preface that saying the DLC was bad because it was too hard is lame and doesn't make sense to review bomb it online, but hey, I can't stop 70,000 frustrated players from commenting on the internet. That's impossible. Again, I do think there are valid criticisms to be made about the difficulty feeling unfair, and I think it's fine to call out those details. What I don't think is cool, however, is every content creator and their geriatric grandmother flying to Twitter to call out and shit on players that might have said the difficulty was unfair and continue to berate them because of it. By all means, I know these games have a big motto behind them, which is the iconic "get good," and yeah, that saying is what has honestly driven so many players to keep at these difficulty games and overcome some of the hardest bosses in video game history. It's endearing, honestly, but I find it genuinely shitty when big name YouTubers or streamers just shock people complaining down to, "You're clearly bad, what's the matter with you? Just get better or use all the items in the game to help you. Idiot." This probably goes for many fans of the games, but it makes sense in my eyes that for challenging and fair bosses in the Soul series, I should have to rely on my ability to, again, get good, where I'm reading a boss's moves well, that I'm able to keep up with attacks and time my own counters. I should not have to run around the map and hunt down the Thick Cheeks talisman to increase my damage negation slightly to a boss fight that will kill me in 2 shots. And again, this goes without saying for many of the longtime fans of the series, we know what makes a good boss, and we know when that boss flow, when we get into a really, really challenging boss and finally are able to read how to fight him, getting good counters, know the dodges, and for some of those insane attacks that will do a shit ton of damage to us, we're able to dodge them or mitigate them to a point where we get to a skill level that is accomplishing. In my opinion, with a few of the bigger bosses in Shadow of the Erdtree, that feeling is almost absent. Anyway, tangent over, let's finally discuss the DLC at hand, and just to keep that wonderful negativity train rolling, let's talk about what I didn't like about Shadow of the Erdtree. Yeah, okay, first impressions of the DLC as I was playing through, I thought the difficulty was skewed a little too high. Not to the point of quitting and never wanting to play this game again, we're not talking about Dark Souls 2 here, but definitely to the point where several times fighting some of these bosses and dying definitely over 100 times, when I finally beat them, I didn't get that awesome feeling of overcoming an insanely difficult adversary. I was just okay with finally being done and able to move on to a different area, which was a little bit of a mood killer in a few moments of the playthrough. These bosses are easily going to go down as some of the hardest FromSoft bosses ever made. Like, for real, I can't imagine what was going through the devs' heads when they made these guys. These bosses deal ludicrous amounts of damage to your character in one hit, and if you survive those, don't worry, there's usually a chained attack into a combo that lasts roughly 45 seconds, and you will be wishing you leveled your endurance to 75 before challenging any of these bosses, because you'll be dodging and rolling in order to not get hit or two-tapped by any of these bosses' attacks. On top of that, and this is something I feel has been an issue in the base game, but some bosses flat out just have a one-shot move, meaning if you're caught by it, too bad, automatic game over, doesn't matter how big your health bar is, sorry. I personally find one-shots pretty cheap, but if they're easy to telegraph and learn to avoid and counter, then it's all good. Bosses in Shadow of the Erdtree seem to have many moves that will flat out zap your health away in less than a second if you're not quick enough. Not only that, but many bosses have what are called roll catchers that if you happen to dodge at a moment you felt was safe, they follow up with an ongoing attack with a very quick second attack, which will be nearly impossible to avoid. You gotta be like frame perfect in order to not get hit by that, but don't worry, they also love to hit you with the oops, gotcha, where they'll fucking delay their stupid attack, and it takes the entirety of the Lord of the Rings movie for them to actually land the goddamn thing against you. Then there's my favorite move, where the game is programmed to know that you've just hit the X button to heal, letting the boss know that you can't actually heal and will attack you mid-heal, thereby nullifying the health you just restored in half a second. Oh, let's not forget the wonderful AoE attacks that literally cover the entire ground of the arena and, oh well, didn't manage to get to the other side of the continent of Asia in time? That sucks. There goes 85% of your health, bucko, and don't forget. So yes, this was something that admittedly frustrated me beyond belief in many of the bosses. These specific details in boss attack patterns are something I found to be a tad bit insane in base game Elden Ring, and unfortunately I felt were only amplified in the Shadow of the Erdtree. Like I had mentioned a few minutes ago, that boss flow that many of the past FromSoftware bosses had to them, the difficult ones, doesn't seem to be apparent here, as many times fighting all these new ridiculous bosses, I'm not really getting into figuring out where to dodge, how to time my attacks, and know what is safe to heal or counterattack. I feel like I'm just relying on RNG, the random numbers generator, so that the boss doesn't combo me within 2 minutes. Because goddamn, if these bosses don't have some of the shittiest, longest combos that will never give you a chance to actually fucking fight them or play the game, then dude, like, look at some of this shit. Fantastic music off the bat. Oh, fantastic damage off the bat. Oh my god. Look, guys, look at all my health just evaporate in 1/2 second. Okay, alright, cool. Nice little follow-up there. A third follow-up. Oh, a fourth follow-up. That's nice. Okay, I guess I'll never be able to play the game. I didn't make it. Okay, see, this is what happens, guys. Look, it's the onslaught now. Well done, Patchy. Just go out and gather all the Scadutree blessings to make yourself stronger. So this isn't as big as a complaint as the Nutso bosses. I actually sort of like the idea of the Scadutree fragments as an alternative way to level up your character in the DLC. It makes sense so that your level 300 New Game Plus character can't flatten bosses, thereby making the game too easy and then really not fun. I will say, I think these Scadutree fragments weren't executed in the best way. So how they work is basically you collect these fragments around the map, and as you collect enough, you'll be able to level up your blessings at Sites of Graces in the Shadow Realm. In a way very similar to how you went about adding Crimson Flasks to your inventory with Erdtree seeds in the base game. Only difference here is with Erdtree seeds, you had more than the necessary amount around the map to collect in order to level your flasks up to max. With Scadutree fragments, you have 50 total for the max Shadow Realm strength, and there just so happens to be 50 across the new map. Meaning, if you want to be a big beefy boy that does Monjo damage to the bosses, it's fetch quest time! You literally have to scour the lands of shadows to find them all, or at least an amount to get you to a comfortable level. So there's two things with this, both good and bad. The good being it encourages you to go out and explore the new map and find them, leading to new discoveries, maybe a new boss, finding some new weapons, you know, the good aspects of what a good open world game should be, which I do equate Elden Ring to being a good open world game. The bad thing, this could take a long time. This is by no means an easy map to traverse, so if you're having a hard time navigating the land or finding an area, it might get a little tedious to go out and hunt for them. This thereby kills the momentum of wanting to get stronger and beat a boss, in my opinion. And this kind of goes back to what I said earlier about having to run around to different corners of the map for one small item to help me increase my stats slightly, so the boss only 2-shots me instead of 1-shots me. It just doesn't make a lot of sense there. I feel an easy solution could have been one of two ideas. 1. Either hide more than 50 fragments around the Realm of Shadows, making them more plentiful to stumble across. Or 2. do it how Sekiro did, where after the player defeats a boss, alongside their normal boss remembrance, give them an item called Power of the Enemy, and have that item to increase your character's attack power and defense in the Shadowlands. Heck, after any boss, give them a Scadutree blessing and just do it that way. You don't need multiple to level up to one Scadutree level, you just need to defeat a boss, whether or not that be a field boss or a main boss. And when you rest at a site of grace, well, now you have like 2 or 3 that you can level up to go challenge a main boss that might be giving you a hard time. That would make going out to find and defeat bosses more enticing and rewarding, fueling the drive to find and fight another big baddie to get their power. So, yeah, the Scadutree fragments were a nice touch, but definitely could have been implemented a bit differently in my opinion. Not the worst, but could have been gone about a different way. Holy shit, do I have a lot to say about this piece of ass. I really am not a fan of the final boss. I do think there are worse bosses in this series as a whole, even though for the most part I was adamantly saying how I thought he was the worst one. Radahn, the consort of Miquella, definitely doesn't shine too bright for me, even though half the time in the fight he's flashbanging me constantly and I can't see a goddamn fucking thing because the brightness is cranked up to 1,000. Many people expected the unseen character of Godwyn the Golden to make some sort of appearance in this DLC, especially as the final boss, as in the deep lore of Elden Ring, Godwyn and Miquella, the star of the DLC, kind of had some sort of like strong brotherly connection before, you know, the entire lands between kind of got nuked by like the Shattering War. But instead we got Radahn, which, okay, not terrible. It is interesting that they brought back a boss that we've already previously fought, but I mean, it's not that bad, I guess, right? This boss absolutely ruins the entire build-up of Shadow of the Erdtree. I hate this boss so much. I hate this fucking boss so much. I think the consort of Miquella phase, where he's just comboing you non-stop, is going to go down as one of the most frustratingly difficult bosses ever made in a FromSoft game. Nay, the most difficult boss in a FromSoft game. I mean, it's relentless. At this point, everybody probably came to a unanimous conclusion that this is the hardest boss that FromSoftware has ever made. And I mean, yeah, it is. It's so hard. It's harder than Melania. I even say that when I'm fighting him in the video, which, like, if you're harder than this, like, and like, don't get me wrong, I enjoy all these hard bosses. I really do. Like, it's one of the staple, like, pieces of these games is to fight extremely hard bosses. And I don't know, I could just be screaming from the rooftops at nobody right now, but I did think a lot of this boss was just not fun to fight. Not necessarily that it was bad, but just like unfun to put up with. All these switch ups and combos and after image attacks and flashbang attacks, and each time he swings his sword, it's followed by like these holy light beams that will also damage you. I mean, like, I get it, you know, it's the finale to the DLC, which is already crazily hard, but like, dude, this was insane. The damage that he's putting out is absurd. There are moves in his arsenal that will two-shot you in less than a second. That double swipe attack, horrible. The attack where he jumps up into the air and sends meteors down, only to follow it up with after images, what the fuck? The meteor attack? If you didn't know that meteor attack was coming in the second phase, like if you didn't think back to the Star Scourge Radahn fight and remember that he does a meteor attack, and didn't bring that knowledge or memory into this version of Radahn's fight, I'm not crazy about this boss. I've only fought him on one character. I do intend to fight him again when I put this DLC on YouTube as like a little playthrough, so maybe my opinion will change. I know a lot of people like him. I know a lot of people dislike him. I think that's just how it's going to be. Two tiny little things that I just want to clarify before I move on to what I genuinely loved about the DLC. The difficulty, right? Okay, super difficult, that's what all these games are. Fine, I get it. I overcame and I adapted. Was it frustrating at some points? Yeah. Did it make me upset? Yeah. Did I get over it? Yeah. I will say, while the difficulty was extremely frustrating at those points, you know, the entire time I've been playing these games, I've had moments where I thought, this is way too hard. And eventually, I get past it, you know? I fought some of the toughest fucking bosses this entire series has ever put out. You know, they keep getting harder and harder, yeah. I mean, that's just the nature of how they're going to be making their games. They can't just make bosses that anybody can flatten in an instant. Though I know there are some insane fucking players who will just run into these bosses no problem and crush them within like 1 minute of like, you know, their third attempt. I know they're out there. I know there are players out there that are just built different. I think when it comes down to it, I'm not really criticizing the fact that it was too hard. I just think that some of the points that make a few of these bosses difficult wasn't so enjoyable. Not that it was bad, it was just not the most fun. Not that I hate it, it was just not my cup of tea. The difficulty, to be honest, wasn't horrendous. It was probably the most difficult experience I've had with any of the FromSoft games, especially with multiple of the past games under my belt. Going into this thinking I would be fine, only to be humbled, was definitely an experience I wasn't expecting to have. Did I hate it? I can't reiterate this enough. No, I didn't hate it. I just thought it was very, very hard. And yes, I know, I also can't stress this enough. I knew the Scadutree blessings were a thing right off the bat. It is very explicitly explained to you that they are an item that increases your damage and damage negation only in the Land of Shadow as you collect more. I was fine with that. That is not something that I thought was a bad aspect about the DLC. Could they have maybe arranged them a little bit differently to find around the map? Yeah, but, you know, the way they did it was not the end of the world. I think it just would have been a little nicer if there were a few more to find in certain parts of the map, or they were a little bit more abundant, or you got them after you fought bosses, whatever. Alright, we good? I only wanted to put those two little disclaimers there because I know a lot of people are throwing counter arguments to the counter arguments about people making their claims and criticisms about the DLC. It's a shame to see so many Souls players and fans of the series tear each other apart over like the difficulty of the DLC, where I see people bringing up valid points only to be shot down by people who think they know what they're talking about, but might not, but also the people who should know what they're talking about aren't actually giving a full picture of what they think is hard. I don't know. It's frustrating. It's annoying. These are just my opinions. Don't take them that hard. And like I said a few times already in this video, my opinions might change with a second playthrough of Shadow of the Erdtree. Alright, we good? Alright, perfect. On to... Right up there with base game Elden Ring, this is hands down the most beautiful piece of artwork FromSoft has ever put out. This is legitimately one of the prettiest backdrops to a game that I have ever played. The Shadowlands is gorgeous. Everywhere you go is like a new picturesque location that you've never experienced, even in fucking base game Elden Ring. Each and every one of the new areas in the Shadowlands is unique from the last one that you just stopped by. Seriously, all of these new plateaus and cliffs and plains that you will discover is the chef's kiss on the art direction scale when it comes to presentation and look and form. And Jesus, just take a look at some of these places. Right off the bat, stepping out of that cave, boom, you're presented with the gravesite plain. Look at this sprawling new area. Every place that you can see in the distance, you'll be able to travel to eventually, with the giant Scadutree in the background just waiting for you to get back there and see what this land has to offer. You'll start running around from highs and lows, like literally all over this map. When you're making your way across the Shadow Atlas, the sky's turning all these crazy vibrant colors like greenish yellow, these faded blues and pale oranges, each different location that you travel in this one minuscule location on this huge map. Then you got places that don't even seem like they fit in the Shadowlands, like the ruins of Ra, which have beautiful, vibrant, clear skies, almost like the base game of Elden Ring, where as you explore this jungle temple, you get to find different areas that lead to the game's history and backstory of different characters throughout the Land of Shadow. You'll stumble across the god of Elden Ring, Marika, her home village, which is this beautiful, picturesque daisy field filled with a bunch of colorful flowers that scatter this entire plateau, that you can see the entire map of the Shadowlands from below, clouded in fog. And then boom, head on over to the Jagged Peak, which is basically Mount Doom from the Lord of the Rings, where you'll ascend this stormy mountain where the sky is lit with bright orange yellow lightning crashing across the sky as you ascend this jagged, dangerous terrain, only to fight the biggest fucking baddest ugly looking motherfucking dragon you have ever seen in a Souls game. And it's fucking great because this guy is here too to help you. And of course, you'll soon make your way to the lowlands, like the Cerulean coast, the shoreline that's dotted in both gleaming bright red and blue flowers that go all the way to the beaches. And let's not forget about the scary part of the game, the abyssal woods, this haunting atmosphere that you find on accident, only to end up in what is one of the scariest areas in any FromSoftware game, because your horse won't actually come when you call him, because he's afraid of the enemies from Bloodborne which make a return, and if they see you, you're dead instantly. Like actually, they'll just kill you in one shot. And it's up to you to navigate your way and sneak past the monsters through these nuclear orange flowers that lead to one of the funnest mini dungeons and one of the best bosses that this DLC has to offer. Genuinely, I can ramble on for like another 15 minutes on how, and I know I've said it a lot already, beautiful the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC is. It is literally the best part, in my opinion, about this game. It is phenomenally gorgeous. And it goes for all the other additions like weapons, armor, new spells, anything that you can equip on your character is all painstakingly detailed to a T to look absolutely immaculate. I'm talking some of the best fucking designs you have seen ever in a FromSoftware game. I can't stress it enough. The looks department is like a 12 out of 10 for Shadow of the Erdtree. It is mwah. And I mentioned it only briefly when talking about the bosses, but I will absolutely give credit where credit is due to one of them that took my heart, and that's Messmer, the poster boy of the DLC, who we've seen in all the promotional art and trailers, is the star of this DLC. His boss fight is so good. It's got that super challenging aspect that everybody loves about all these bosses, and is still one of the funnest boss fights in the entire game. Like, hands down, he's up there with Godfrey, Original Radon, and Malekith for me. This boss was outstanding. I loved fighting Messmer. I love his backstory. His moveset is fun to learn and dangerous when you get caught off guard by a few of them, but not to the point that it'll make you slam your head into the desk thinking, why is it so difficult? It's still challenging as hell, but boy, do you feel like an absolute god when you finally take him out. Whoa! Whoa! So overall, I very much enjoyed Shadow of the Erdtree. It kind of brought me back to day one Elden Ring when the game first came out in 2022. It kind of made me relive the first moments of when I booted up Elden Ring for the first time. Exploring this new, untapped land with so much potential and so many places to see and so many big bastards to go fight and get my shit rocked multiple times. It was a lot of fun. Were there moments that did frustrate me and get me upset? Yeah, there were moments that happened to me. I'm not gonna lie. Was it ever to the point that I sat there and said, this DLC sucks and I hate it? No. You know what happened? I got good, and I beat the DLC. Did it take a little longer than I would have liked to? Admittedly, yes, but I think that probably just comes down to me being a stubborn Souls player that refuses to use any of the other things available in Elden Ring. What could I say? I like sticking to the build that I made from day one and seeing how far it can take me. And you know what? This took me to the end. It was an uphill battle, as uphill battles can get. But we got there, and I had fun. A few road bumps that did have me throwing myself through a concrete wall, yes. But overall, I enjoyed the DLC. It does seem like FromSoftware got a little tired of everybody being at each other's throats on Twitter and Steam, and all the mixed reviews on Steam, because 2 weeks after the DLC dropped, they issued 2 separate balancing patches that kind of makes the early half of Shadow of the Erdtree a bit easier, where the Scadutree blessings actually give you a tiny percentage more in attack bonus and damage negation bonus. So, who knows? Did they just want the negative reviews on Steam to stop, or did they actually come to a conclusion that maybe, perhaps, some points in the early game and midpoint of the DLC might have been a little unbalanced when it came to, well, yeah. Either way, like many, we got there, we beat it, and as I stated, I will be doing a playthrough of this DLC. I think I just have to take a few more personal days of a breather. I was a little Elden Ringed out, only because I had been playing for a good month, and I think I just need a tiny bit of a refresh. I'm playing some games in between that I want to finish before I do start committing time to recording and uploading to YouTube again. I don't know how long the DLC episodes are going to be, or how many they're going to be. There could possibly be more than base game Elden Ring. There could be less. I don't know. Just depends on how I want to do it. We'll see when that happens. I want to thank you guys for watching me ramble about a video game for the last 30 minutes. I appreciate you guys coming by to hear what my lame opinions are about a game that I'm pretty shit at. As always, you know, the normal YouTube rigmarole. If you guys liked the video, leave a comment, let me know what you think, and don't forget to subscribe if you like me doing these videos. I'll see you guys shortly in the Shadowlands. This has been Dontachi. I'll talk to you later.
Hate like attention.